You know, inside every single living thing on this planet, there's a silent microscopic ballet happening right this second. And it's that dance that determines the difference between perfect health and devastating disease. So, what's the hidden thread that connects something as everyday as the common cold to a disease as feared as cancer? I mean, on the surface, they seem like they're from completely different worlds, right? But the answer is found in that tiny microscopic ballet, and it is honestly shockingly simple. Very often, the root cause of the problem is just a single, unbelievably small error. One tiny machine inside your body, one out of trillions, has either broken down or, worse, it started doing the wrong job entirely. So you can think of it like this. Almost everything that can go wrong in your body often boils down to one of these little workers malfunctioning. That machine is called a protein. And to understand it, well, that's to understand life itself. Okay, so to really get our heads around the massive breakthrough we're about to talk about, we first have to understand what these tiny machines even are. We've got to go back to the absolute basics of how life works and really see why these proteins are maybe the most important workers in the entire universe. Alright, so what exactly is a protein? You know, the simplest and maybe the best way to think of one is as a biological machine. They are these tireless, super specialized workers inside every single one of your cells. They're what carry oxygen, they build your muscles, they digest your food, they transmit signals in your brain. I mean, literally every single thing that keeps you alive is being done by a protein. Let me put it another way. Imagine your body is this huge, bustling city. Your DNA, that's like the master blueprint for the entire city, and it's stored safely away in the city's main library. But blueprints don't do any work, right? The proteins are the actual workers who make the city run. They are the construction crews building skyscrapers, the couriers delivering packages, the engineers running the power plants, you name it. Without them, the city just stops. And for a really clear example, just think about a protein called hemoglobin. Its job is incredibly specific. Hemoglobin is basically a delivery truck. It drives to your lungs, it picks up a shipment of oxygen, and then it drives that oxygen out to every single part of your body that needs it. And that's just one protein out of tens of thousands of different types, each with its own very, very specific job.
So, where do these amazing little workers even come from? Well, they're built as needed, from a set of instructions. Let's go back to our city analogy for a second. Inside each of your cells, there's a massive central library. This library holds all the blueprints needed to build and run your entire body. That library, that's your DNA. Now, let's say your body needs a specific protein. Maybe it needs more of those hemoglobin delivery trucks. It's not going to check out the entire, priceless master blueprint. That would be crazy, right? Way too inefficient and risky. Instead, the cell sends a librarian to find the exact page for hemoglobin truck and makes a quick, disposable photocopy of just that one page. That photocopy is called mRNA. Then, this mRNA photocopy leaves the safety of the library and travels out to a cellular factory. There, the instructions on the copy are read and a brand new protein worker is built, piece by piece, all ready to get to work. So the whole flow of information in life is actually beautifully simple. It goes from the permanent DNA blueprint to a temporary mRNA photocopy to a functional protein worker.
Okay, now we are at the most important point of this entire explainer, so please listen closely. A protein is first built as this long, floppy chain of building blocks, kind of like a string of beads. But a simple string can't do a job. To become a machine, that string has to fold itself into a very specific, incredibly intricate, three-dimensional shape. Let me say that again, because this is the whole game. The chain itself is almost useless until it folds. The shape is what gives the protein its power. This final shape, or what scientists call the fold, is everything. When the protein folds the right way, it works perfectly. The key fits the lock, the delivery truck has wheels, but if that string of beads folds into the wrong shape, even just a little bit wrong, it's a disaster. It either can't do its job or even worse, it starts doing something actively harmful. This right here is the molecular starting point for so much disease. Think of it like a key to your house. A correctly folded protein is a perfectly cut key that smoothly opens one specific lock. But a misfolded protein, that's like a bent or broken key. Not only will it not open the lock, but if you jam it in there and try to force it, you might break the lock itself and cause even more damage. So many devastating diseases, things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, are thought to be caused by proteins misfolding into these stay toxic shapes that clump together and damage our brain cells. So the solution seems kinda obvious, doesn't it? If misfolded proteins are causing diseases, let's just figure out their correct shape and then design drugs to either fix them or stop them. Well, that is exactly what scientists have been trying desperately to do for over 50 years.
But what seemed like a simple engineering problem turned out to be one of the hardest, most frustrating mysteries in the history of science. It was a grand challenge with two massive roadblocks standing in the way.
This mystery was so hard to crack because scientists were basically fighting a war on two different fronts. First, there was a practical, real-world problem. Actually seeing these tiny machines in a lab is just incredibly difficult. And second, there was a theoretical problem. Trying to predict their shape with math and computers was so ridiculously complex that for decades, it seemed, well, fundamentally impossible.
Let's start with that practical problem. The source material here uses a perfect analogy. For decades, trying to figure out a protein structure was like being a master watchmaker, but you're forced to fix a broken watch while you're blindfolded. You know something's wrong, you can feel the watch, but you just can't get a clear picture of the tiny little gears inside to see which one is bent. So why is it so hard? Well, a single cell has tens of thousands of different kinds of proteins, all just jumbled together in this crowded, chaotic soup. So trying to isolate just one type of protein that you want to study, getting it to hold still, and then blasting it with X-rays to get a faint picture of its shape, it's a massive challenge. I mean, for generations of scientists, it was totally normal for a PhD student to spend their entire 5-year program just to solve the structure of one single protein. Some proteins took teams of scientists over a decade, and many just remained impossible to solve.
Okay, so lab work was brutally slow. So you might be thinking, well, what about the other way? Why not just use a supercomputer to predict the shape? And this is where scientists slammed headfirst into a theoretical brick wall called Levinthal's paradox. So back in 1969, a scientist named Cyrus Levinthal did some pretty simple math. He realized that a protein couldn't possibly be finding its final shape by just randomly trying out every single option until it stumbles on the right one. And why not? Because the number of possible shapes is so astronomically huge, it would take an impossible amount of time. In other words, Levinthal proved that nature can't be guessing. There isn't enough time in the history of the universe for trial and error to work. There has to be some kind of hidden shortcut.
Now, get ready for this number, because it's just hard to even comprehend. For just an average-sized protein, the number of physically possible shapes it could theoretically fold into is estimated to be around 10 to the power of 300. Let me try to give you some context for that, which is almost impossible. That's a 10 with 300 zeros after it. For comparison, the total number of atoms in the entire known universe is estimated to be around 10 to the power of 80. So, the number of possible shapes for just one of these proteins is unimaginably bigger than all the atoms in all the stars and all the galaxies combined. It's a number so huge that it's basically infinite.
So what does Levinthal's paradox really mean in practice? It means that if a protein had to find its one correct life-giving shape by trying every single possibility, even at a speed we can't imagine, like, say, 1 billion new shapes every single second, it would still take longer than the entire 13.8 billion year age of the universe just to find the right one.
And yet, in our bodies, right now, trillions and trillions of proteins are folding themselves flawlessly. Nature takes that long string of beads and somehow guides it to its perfect final shape in a tiny fraction of a second. This was the 50-year-old grand challenge of biology. Brute force guessing is impossible, so there has to be a shortcut. There must be some hidden, elegant rules of physics that guide the protein on its journey. But what were those rules? For half a century, this protein folding problem was like the holy grail of science. Progress was slow, it was hard-won, it was tiny step by tiny step. And then in late 2020, an announcement sent an earthquake through the scientific world. An AI system from DeepMind, a company owned by Google, had done it. It was called AlphaFold, and it had, for all intents and purposes, solved the mystery. The detective had finally arrived and cracked the case wide open.
So how? How did an AI succeed where decades of human genius had stalled out? Well, it wasn't one single trick, but this incredibly clever combination of 3 different ideas. First, it used what you could call the golden data. You see, AlphaFold stood on the shoulders of giants. It was trained on the public database of about 200,000 protein structures that scientists had painstakingly solved in labs over the last 50 years. It scanned every single one, learning all the common patterns, the likely angles, the basic rules of how proteins like to fold. Basically, it studied every solved case file in history to learn what a correctly folded protein looks like. The second piece of the puzzle was evolutionary clues, and this part is just pure genius.
The researchers had AlphaFold compare the sequence of a new, unsolved protein with similar proteins from thousands of different species, from bacteria to oak trees to mice to humans. The logic here is this: if two parts of a protein chain have stayed exactly the same for millions of years of evolution, they must be super important to that protein shape. And even more cleverly, if one part of the chain changes and another part, way far away on the string, always changes at the same time, that's a huge clue that those two distant parts are probably physically touching in the final 3D shape. It's like finding out two cousins are always standing next to each other in every family photo. You can guess they're probably very close. AlphaFold used evolution to find out which parts of the protein chain were close friends. And third, it used advanced AI. AlphaFold's brain is a cutting-edge AI architecture called a transformer. This is the same basic tech that powers language models like ChatGPT. Now think about how ChatGPT works. It's amazing at understanding the relationships between words in a long sentence to create text that makes sense. A transformer sees the whole context. AlphaFold does something similar, but instead of a sentence made of words, it sees a protein made of amino acids. It uses its powerful transformer brain to look at all that golden data and all those evolutionary clues at the same time, and piece everything together into a final, breathtakingly accurate prediction of the protein's 3D shape.
The arrival of AlphaFold wasn't just another small step forward. This was a seismic shift, a true game changer. Predicting the structure of almost any protein went from being a 50-year-old grand challenge to a problem that could be solved, often in just an afternoon. So this brings us to the most important question of all. What does this actually mean for us, for our health, and for the future of medicine?
This is always the first question, isn't it? It's the most hopeful one. We can finally see the tiny machines that break and cause disease. So, does this mean that cures for cancer, Alzheimer's, and everything else are just around the corner?
Well, the honest answer for now is not quite. And understanding why that is helps us appreciate just how complex modern medicine really is. Knowing the 3D shape of a faulty protein is an absolutely critical, game-changing, revolutionary first step. But it is just the first step on a very long, very expensive, and very difficult road.
Let's just quickly walk through the typical drug discovery pipeline. First, before you can even think about a protein's shape, biologists have to figure out which specific protein, out of tens of thousands, is the bad guy causing a disease. That step alone can take years. Step 2 was determining the structure of that target protein. This is the part we've been talking about, the step that used to take years, sometimes more than a decade. This is the bottleneck that AlphaFold just smashed, cutting the timeline from years down to days. It's a huge, huge acceleration. But the journey is far from over. Next, chemists have to design and test thousands of potential drug molecules to find one that can perfectly bind to the protein's shape and fix its function. That can take several more years. And finally, you have to spend years and years going through rigorous clinical trials in humans to prove the drug is both safe and effective. The whole process, from start to finish, takes on average over 10 years and costs around $2 billion for one successful drug. So AlphaFold has made one incredibly hard part of that journey way faster, but the rest of that long road is still there. So while speeding up drug discovery is a very big deal, the true, deep impact of AlphaFold is something even bigger. It's not just about making an old process faster, it's about giving us a fundamentally deeper understanding of biology itself. Think of AlphaFold less as a drug-making machine and more as a super-powered microscope for all of science. For the first time ever, researchers in any field, whether they study brain function, or crop diseases, or even plastic-eating enzymes, they can instantly get a highly accurate 3D picture of any protein they're interested in. This lets them understand the mechanisms of life and disease at a level that was just impossible before. For example, a scientist studying a rare genetic disease might have spent years just guessing why it was happening. Now, they can instantly see the shape of the faulty protein and say, "Aha, I see it. The problem is right here." This part of the machine is bent out of shape, and that's what's stopping it from working. It allows them to ask better, smarter questions, which is the real foundation of all scientific progress.
And that right there, that leads us to the most powerful takeaway from this whole story. AlphaFold's success didn't come from discovering some new law of physics. Its big breakthrough was in finding a smarter, more powerful way to use all the knowledge humanity had already collected. It combined decades of lab data, the deep principles of evolution, and the pattern-finding power of modern AI to connect the dots in a way no human ever could. This is a powerful demonstration of a totally new way to do science itself.
So let's just quickly recap this incredible journey. We started by learning that our bodies are run by these tiny machines called proteins, and that their 3D shape is absolutely everything. For 50 years, we were basically working in the dark, because figuring out that shape was a grand challenge of science. And then, an AI called AlphaFold finally turned on the lights by cleverly combining all of our existing knowledge. Now, while this won't lead to overnight cures for everything, it has given scientists a revolutionary new tool, a microscope to see the very engines of life. For half a century, we were trying to fix those engines while blindfolded. Now we have the blueprints. We can see the intricate shapes of the machines that make us who we are. And that empowers a whole new generation of scientists. And so the final, thrilling question isn't just what diseases we will cure, but now that we can finally see the engines of life with this astonishing new clarity, what will we be inspired to build?
If you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe and hit the bell to the later update from my channel. Thank you for watching till the end and see you in the next video.